Welcome back to the Bronze Medalist podcast. On this episode, we discuss the Chariot's one wing. Isn't that right, Matt?
Yeah, spoiler alert, I'm not Jaren. My name is...
Why is...
Yeah,
I mean... we'll get into that. Start the music.
All right.
It was. I used our school. I still use the MSU audio blocks thing for that.
You need to be careful. The beaver police might come shut you down.
Yeah, maybe. I don't know. It does get flagged on YouTube, which is annoying. But hi, everyone. Welcome to the Bronze Medalist podcast. My name is Kayle, and here with me I have someone who is not Jaren. This is Matt.
I feel like I might have as much experience as Jaren if Jaren had never, did this podcast. So that's kind of the void I'm hoping to fill here tonight.
Jaren has done 19 episodes of the podcast. He did miss one previously. So Jaren has a little bit more experience with, I guess, the really heavy shit. But
yeah, not me. I mean, it's pretty much just all Somewhere Over the Rainbow. I just listen to that on loop. But
that's not true. I do know you have listened to a bit of Sabaton in your time.
I have listened to a bit of Sabaton in my time. You've recently turned me on to Caspian, like
Caspian, post rock. I think some of their stuff could be called sort of progressive metal. Did I send you a link to Towndra yet?
What's up?
Towndra. There's a band called Towndra. I can't remember if I sent you a link to them as well. They are a great prog metal / post rock.
I don't think you have yet. So you're doing me a disservice before you ambush me with the podcast tonight, man. What the heck? What the heck?
Yeah, I'm so very sorry. So Matt is a good friend of mine. Also went to college with me, just like Jaren, in the comm arts department.
Bunch of broadcasting nerds, the whole lot of them.
Whole bunch of broadcasting nerds. This is the very first episode that I've done in my brand new, I guess, studio space. This is my my spare room that I've put some acoustic foam in. I really would have loved to have Jaren in this episode, but he ended up kind of getting. Not that I don't like you, Matt.
Okay,
but
that's fair. I'll let it slide this time.
Just this time. He ended up getting ambushed with work last night and some other personal commitments. So I decided, since I promised an episode this Saturday after like a month off, I figured we better get to it. So usually before we get to discussing the album, we like to kind of talk about a little bit of what's going on with us. And Matt, I guess since you're new, you can kind of introduce yourself. We've had guests previously. Donnie, a fellow we both know, has been a guest on the podcast previously. So why don't you introduce yourself, Matt? Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Oh, boy. Wow. I am Matt Huffman, as he said before. Like you said, went to college with him. I'm just going to repeat a bunch of stuff you already said about me, just to really drive the point home. But I currently am wheeling and dealing in the Bakken oil field, and I'd like to think that I listen to a fair amount of music. I don't claim to be a very, very versed in the subject matter we are currently discussing, but I think I have a good taste every once in a while. But
yeah,
I got out of the Marine Corps in 2012 and came back up to good old North Dakota and ended up in college with Kayle, and we do also. Do they know about your nerd stuff, or am I allowed to talk about that?
Oh, I'm pretty sure they know.
Okay, yeah.
I think I've mentioned D&D quite a bit.
Yeah,
but we're both huge nerds.
Yeah, let's say we were both in the broadcasting department. I was actually a multimedia studies student, which is basically just broadcasting with a side of graphic design and marketing. So that's how I knew Kayle initially, and then we started doing a weekly D&D session. Being huge nerds, but. Now here we are. Getting ready to talk about this album.
Here we are almost 2 years later. So, I guess with me, I mean, anyone who's listened to the podcast, kind of me, a broadcast major. Recently graduated, though that's kind of actually up in the air as of the last couple of weeks because I found out I am at only 119 credits.
Dun, dun, dun.
Which is amazing. It's fantastic. So I need to talk to Bill, who is the department
Good
chair.
old Bill. I call him
set up.
He's my college dad. He's my advisor, so.
Bill is fantastic.
He is.
And my previous advisor had retired, so I'm just going to call Bill and talk about, I guess, registering.
Just tell him Matt Huffman sent you. He'll straighten you
Yeah.
out. Get you the.
I've had a little bit to drink tonight. It is quite late, but I'm hopefully going to register for 1 credit.
Brutal.
So
what's your one credit going to be?
I think probably just radio activities.
That's fair.
One of my, I guess, coworkers or former coworkers. I don't think he's officially employed at WGO anymore because he's. I don't know if you ever ran into David at MSU, but he's an older fellow who worked at Geo for a time. He owns a radio station in Colorado, and I've helped him out with a few ads for that. And he's hoping to get some new equipment set up for the radio side of things at MSU. And I guess I wouldn't mind being involved in that for a single credit. It's like 2 hours a week, and
oh man,
it's so rough. It's terrible.
You could just sell it as like an alumni activity. I mean, potentially.
Yeah, so
it's all about how you sell it, man.
It shouldn't be tough. It's just annoying to have to do it in the first place. And really, it's only my own fault. I kind of did my math a little bit wrong because I started my last semester with enough credits to graduate, and then I dropped a whole bunch of classes. And apparently, Matt knows how terrible I am at basic addition and subtraction, so I ended up with 1 credit short. So it's just wonderful.
You're just building suspense, is what I'd call it.
Yeah, just building suspense. Whatever happens, I am not walking again. That was miserable. Just having to stand there for an hour and a half. And
in your fancy dress.
In my fancy dress, my hot robes. It was very, very unpleasant. So, yeah, lots of wonderful stuff to figure out. Is there anything that you want to let people know about for you, Matt, that you've been doing that's funny or interesting? Any stories you want to tell?
Oh man, basically I like to think I have a pretty nice cushy desk job in the oil field, and most of my day is just herding cats, is like I like to call it. But I do a lot of dispatching we got about a 75 truck outfit over here in the oil field. And what's a funny story? Oh, we have a new dog, right? So one of the guys I work with, he brought home a little black lab, and I'm pretty convinced that it's a cat though, because it literally just sleeps under my desk all day. Like this puppy is like, I think, let's see, he's 14 weeks old now. His birthday's March 7th for everybody keeping track.
Sweet. That is the most lethargic, like, 14-week-old puppy I've ever heard of.
Oh, yeah, it doesn't do anything. The only time he ever gets excited is when the parts girl comes down from Williston. Then he's all amped up, but he doesn't get excited for any of us. So
that does seem kind of like a lab thing. I think labs are generally a little bit more lethargic for a while, and then once they sort of get full size, maybe full size but not full musculature, then they start going absolutely fucking crazy.
Oh yeah, he's gonna be a big pudge whacker though, because he's huge already, and his feet are huge, and everybody feeds him all sorts of junk, all the time. Like everybody just spoils the crap out of this dog. But he can already shake, and he can roll over, and he can speak. So he's off to a good start. He's a smart dog.
He's well trained at the very least. Smart dog. Not that my parents' lab is not well trained, but she's a sweetheart. But generally speaking, I don't credit Labrador Retrievers with an overabundance of brains.
No. That's fair.
They're wonderful. They're wonderful dogs, and they're adorable, and I love them. But they're just, goodness, most of them are just kind of dull as a box of hammers.
Yeah, they try though. It's the thought that counts.
They try their best. They certainly do. Okay, so Matt, I about an hour ago sprung upon you an album.
You did.
It is One Wing by a band called the Chariot. So a little bit of history about this band, the Chariot. They're a American metalcore band from Douglasville, Georgia. They were around from 2003 to 2013, so a 10-year existence for them. Their most present band member was Josh Scogan, who is the founding member of the band. He was a former member of metalcore band Norma Jean.
Oh, I see. I recognize that name, but
Yeah, so an interesting thing I've noticed about metalcore in my time listening to it is that there are a lot of kind of seminal bands that come up that sort of fracture off into multiple different bands that become relatively successful in their own right. There was a band called Attack Attack, which has fractured into like 3 or 4 different bands over the years.
Okay, see, I listened to Attack Attack a whole bunch, but obviously I just don't understand the definition of metal then, because if Attack Attack's metal, then I guess I'm more qualified than I thought.
So this is part of the thing about having a new guest is like kind of explaining different definitions. So Attack Attack is what has been called, it's been referred to as like crabcore or technocore, that sort of thing. Attack Attack is not strictly a metal band. It can be described as being metalcore, but the bands that sort of fractured from it sort of did away with the techno aspects of Attack Attack and stuck more with metal and hardcore, which is what forms the portmanteau of metalcore. And that is sort of the thing about this podcast is sometimes just having to explain the very weird and complex family trees of different metal genres.
You need to make a handout, I think, like just a little pamphlet that you can hand out at the door, you know?
There is probably one that exists. A recent episode that we recorded on the behalf or at the behest of my brother-in-law who listens to this podcast was devoted to explaining different genres. But you have bands like Attack Attack that fracture into different bands and genres. Attack Attack has like Of Mice and Men and Beartooth are the 2 big bands that have kind of come out of that. Of Mice and Men, I'm not sure if they're still making stuff. I actually can't remember if their vocalist died or not. I think he just ended up in the hospital.
I remember they were really popular in 2011. I was listening to them when I was in the Marine Corps still. So
yeah, Of Mice and Men was very popular. I never really got into them. Beartooth I got into a bit more. They are still around. They released an album a few years ago. They might have a new one. I stopped paying attention to Beartooth after a little while. The new car smell sort of wore off.
There you go.
But bands like Norma Jean and bands like the Chariot have always kind of appealed to me because there is something about them that is hard to describe for me as a listener, where I feel they're a lot more honest and raw. There is it doesn't feel like a product to me. Bands like the Chariot, a very similar band to the Chariot is one that's still around called Every Time I Die, and they are bitingly, the lyrics are just biting and sarcastic, and the riffs are not necessarily laden with hooks. They're not necessarily meant to draw in the average listener. They're meant to be abrasive, and they aren't meant to draw in sort of the emo kid.
There you go.
That we would have, or that I would have been when I was in high school, and you, I guess, earlier than that when you were in high school.
Let's not date me here too far, but I'm just saying 2006 MySpace was a very strange place.
And there are some bands that definitely still cash in on that same feeling of early MySpace and of the whole scene period and scene metalcore. I think scene metalcore is something that I've discussed on this podcast before, and I think the Chariot is kind of a good example of the opposite of scene metalcore. It is definitely a fusion of hardcore punk and metal, but it does not appeal to that sensibility. It is a very raw style. The album previous to this, which was called Long Live, was recorded entirely live in singular sessions. It was recorded on magnetic analog tape, and they got all the members of the band in one room, and they recorded everything in the same room at the same time, which is something that doesn't happen a lot these days. A lot of stuff is recorded separately and digitally, which makes it sound really good, especially for some of the stuff we've listened to on this podcast before with technical death metal and that sort of thing. You can get a really clean and really functional sound, but it misses a little bit of humanity, and that is something that I think is very much captured on albums like this. So before I go much further with what I really liked about this album, Matt, this is very fresh in your mind.
It is
the
very
very first
fresh.
listen.
Yeah.
Could I get some of your thoughts on it?
So immediately, like I went into it. You sent me the Spotify link. I opened it all up, and I look, and I like you see the first things to me was like the forget not. All the song titles are already setting you up to like tell a story essentially. Yeah. So it's forget not your first love, speak in tongues, and cheek, tongue and cheek. That's the phrase. Sorry.
Yep.
It's hard to read my scribble notes, but like just seeing that like kind of all laid out like that, and in the beginning I'm like, okay, these guys are here to tell me a story, and so I go through and I listen to the first song. I have the lyrics pulled up so I can follow along and really like be sure to take it all and make sure I don't miss anything on the first listen before we go live and everything.
Before I shove you straight into this.
No, but yeah, and I think, like you were saying, is you kind of have to go, like, with, like, this type of music, you kind of have to go into it, like, you got to be looking, like, you have to go look for the meaning and everything, because I think coming from a person that doesn't listen to as much metal as, like, you or Jaren or any other type of people that would maybe be listening to this podcast, like, a lot of it will, like, blend together, and, like, the screaming and, like, all that stuff will blend together, but I think if you really go into it, and you have, like, the lyrics in front of you the first time, you can, like, really take away a lot of powerful stuff, like some of like the lyrics, and maybe it's just like that. Maybe it's just the artist in me, but there's a lot of there's a lot of powerful examples of contrast in this album, and that was like one of the things that really jumped out to me. How after you get done with Not, you jump to Your, which is more of a transition. Obviously, they have the female. I can't remember her name, unfortunately, but they have the female doing the lyrics and like
the busy bee.
Yep. It just like catches you just off guard. You're like, oh, okay, like bring it back in, and then then like you go first, and you get the "C'est la vie," such is life, is the transition for all those that don't speak French. But I enjoyed that shout out, that nod. Love number 5. Like Samson was impressed as well. Getting a little biblical in there and trying to pick up on that as well, and kind of like talking about all that.
Yeah, to that point, the Chariot has been described, and I guess described themselves. They were a Christian metal band, sort of at their core. It was a faith-based project. Norma Jean is kind of the same way, and something about a lot of bands like the Chariot or Norma Jean or August Burns Red comes to mind is they are faith-based projects, but to me, as a non-religious person, they still have such a great appeal. And like my second favorite band of all time is a band called Silent Planet, who actually I'll get to this later. They have a new album coming out later on this year, and they have a single that's been released that I absolutely dig. But a lot of these Christian metalcore bands, or at the very least the ones that I have listened to, manage to hold my attention even though I am not a religious person, and I think that is commendable, I guess.
Yeah, it definitely like speaks to the power of like the product that's being put in front of you. Like someone from like you said, someone that's not religious like yourself, and like someone that's like, I call myself a very lazy Catholic is how I like to describe it. But like it's almost a pop reference at certain points. Like everybody knows who Samson is. Like just like
yeah,
and like it kind of plays into that. Where you're gonna bring in more people that are gonna like read farther into it, that are like, oh, okay, like I know Samson, and then there's like gonna be other people that just like, oh, hey, like I recognize this, but it's not like a make or break deal to me. Like, it's just they're just
Yeah.
telling a story. Like,
It's a powerful reference no matter who you
and
are.
because you look you look around the rest of the lyrics of the song, and it's she was beautiful, but she helped you into the ground type of deal, and like lyrics like that, the heart shaped enemy, and like the whole Samson was impressed as well. It's kind of just like tying the bow on everything they were setting up in like the lines before it. At least to me, it was.
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree to you. Agree to
Agree
you.
to me.
I agree to you. I've had a bit too much scotch tonight.
No such thing.
Perhaps. So some of the things that I really liked. The first thing that I have written in my notes here is the quotes from the very last song. So Cheek is the sample that they use from The Great Dictator, which
Good
is
old
a
Charlie Chaplin.
good old Charlie Chaplin film. I think one of the last
It,
films he did.
I think it was.
I think.
Yeah. Don't fact check us on that. Don't fact check us on
Yeah.
Twitter. But
I think it was the first or one of the first talkies that he did.
Yep.
One of the first movies with sound that he did, and it was actually one of the first anti-Nazi movies to have come out in America. I think it premiered in either 1949 or 1940 before the U.S. had officially entered World War II.
Mm-hmm.
But it was still a very powerful piece of anti-Nazi propaganda. And once we had entered, it was sort of hailed as that. And even, used as a piece of propaganda, it's very powerful. But I think so far removed from that context, or I say that, but I feel like these days being removed from anti-Nazi propaganda, we're not actually that far removed from that context anymore.
It's all coming full circle a little bit.
It's a weird time in America.
It is a weird time.
But yeah, I think it's very powerful using that sample. And throughout their history, the Chariot used a lot of lyrics to invoke topics of anti-materialism, as well as to be a reflection of current events and sort of more fundamentalist Christian ethics. I know fundamentalist Christian.
Whoa, slow down there. No, no.
That is a loaded term, and I think the way that I would prefer to use it is someone who adheres more to the personal morals of someone like Jesus, rather than the fundamentalist aspects of like Leviticus or something like that, which is the Old Testament fundamentalist, which I think is what people refer to when they're speaking of fundies and that sort of thing. But yeah, I think that the use of just samples in general. Mm-hmm. I loved all of the samples on this album. The 50s music from And.
It's the bait and switch in the beginning, man. Like it catches you. It's like it starts off with got that Atomic Age feel, that 50s music, and also just boom, like right in your face type of deal. And
completely by surprise.
I like that too.
There's also the very lengthy Western section in First. Mm-hmm. That is. I think that was very well used, and it reminds me of what would later on in 2015 be used. There's an August Burns Red album called... Okay, pause for a second.
There you go.
I have to remember.
We live in the age of information, Kayle. You can do this. I believe in you.
Yes. August Burns Red discography. So there is an August Burns Red album called Found in Faraway Places, and the title track, it contains the track contains the words "Found in Faraway Places." The song is called "Majoring in the Minors," and that one has a very Western section in it, and it immediately brought to mind memories of that for me, having listened to August Burns Red before I ever discovered the Chariot. There is also on the extended version of that album, or the deluxe version of that album, there is a complete, there's an everlasting, or not everlasting ending, that's a different song. Majoring in the Minors, there is a version of that song that is entirely a country western song, which is...
Hey, sometimes you just gotta sneak them in there, man.
Yeah, it's they do it very well. and it reminded me of that. It brought me right back to that memory, which immediately was a very fond memory. That was a summer that the summer that album came out. I was working at a power plant and just mowing lawns. So I had the entire day to sit on top of a lawnmower and just listen to music, which is sort of where I really got into like Make Them Suffer and recent August Burns Red and a whole bunch of different albums. I think that's the summer that I started listening to like Thy Ardor's Murder and some harder death metal songs. So I have a lot of fond memories of that summer, and it immediately brought that to mind. I think I mentioned earlier, it reminded me a lot of a band called Every Time I Die. And I think I've talked about them before on the podcast. They are not a Christian band, but they are a band of similar tone where a lot of their lyrics are sort of very loaded. They tend to have much more sarcastic lyrics. And the honesty is still there, but it is layered behind just this veneer of complete and total spite and sarcasm. And that's something that I love about their songs. Their vocalist, his writing process used to be getting incoherently drunk before he would start writing lyrics, and then he would sort whatever he wrote down out in the morning. So it reminded me of Every Time I Die, which is another way that sort of really made me immediately comfortable with the music of this album. And like, I was immediately comfortable. What was it like for you sort of going straight into an album that is sort of this hard?
I think if I wasn't like in like I was just like in a relaxed setting, I had the lyrics in front of me, like I said before, and like I went into it, like I said, as soon as I saw that album list, I like went into it looking for a story. So, you know, like a hard's kind of a relative term, I guess. Like the sound is, it's a very raw sound. It's a very in your face sound, you know, but there's also like the being able to follow along with it, you know, it's not something I'm going to listen to before I go to bed, obviously, but it's something that's like, it's introspective, as I guess the word I'd use for it. But like, see, like, it just all comes back to the contrast for me. Like my favorite song on the entire album was actually number 6, which is only like 2 minutes and 14 seconds long, but you have this low piano going on, and you have like the lead singer just like belting it out. Like
Speak is actually how I first discovered the Chariot. There is a vocalist named JT Cavey who is now the vocalist for a progressive band called Era, and he used to do a bunch of vocal covers on YouTube, and one of them was for Speak, and that's how I discovered the Chariot, and immediately kind of got hooked on that. Mm-hmm. Just that really raw emotionality.
And like I'm glad, like we live in the day and age of singles, right? Like I feel like from a general standpoint, like when most people hear a song, like we have access to Spotify now, like the days of like buying an album and like listening to it all the way through are kind of, I don't want to say they're dying necessarily, but like if I hear a new song, I'm gonna go to their Spotify page, I'm gonna see what their like most popular songs are according to everybody else, and I'm gonna listen to them like that, you know. But with this, I started from track 1, I went all the way down to track 10, you know, and like I'm really glad I did, because you know it's very like the album order is very well put together, and like when Speak comes on, you know, you're just coming off Love, and like Speak comes on, it's just like, I don't know, it like hit me. It was like I said, it was my my favorite song in the album, and just like all like the powerful lyrics and stuff, like the bleeding hearts meet bleeding crowns, and it's like, oh wow, like here we go, you know. And it's just like kind of like to me it was like the peak before the come down, you know, of like going into like 7, 8, and 9, or rather in tongues in cheek, if we're being proper.
And I think as far as like consuming music via albums, I think metal is kind of one of those places where it's kind of the last bastion of that, in a way. Of, I think a lot of metal fans prefer to buy and consume their favorite media through albums rather than through singles. I know definitely that's the way that I prefer to do it, because it is a much more personal experience, I think, and especially going to see metal bands live. You can have a personal interaction with the lead singers and guitarists and everyone in a band, because after their show, they are often than not the people that are manning their own merch table. And you can, I've bought most of the merch that I have bought at live shows has been from members of the bands that it is merch for. And it's they have the albums sitting there, and I love to buy albums at live shows because I know precisely who the money is going to.
And like another thing, like when you tell a story through an album and you go off like what's most popular, like I didn't do it, like I said, I didn't do as much research as I could have, beforehand. But like say, I go to Chariot's Facebook page, I go to their Spotify page, and I look and they're like top songs, it's like, let's say it's Tongues, and I just like hear them, and I don't hear the contrast that happens in the album. I don't hear the speaks. I don't hear the first. I don't hear the Cheek. Imagine if you heard Cheek first. If that was like the first song you heard from these guys, it'd be like, I'd be like, okay, I dig the Charlie Chaplin. Don't get me wrong.
Yeah,
but like
75% of the song is a Charlie Chaplin sample.
Yeah, but if you listen to it in order though, it comes like right at the end, and you're like, wow, like that is a great way to close this album out, type of deal.
Context is very important.
Yes, very important. Like if you're gonna listen to these guys, don't start with Cheek. That's my one tip of advice, I guess.
Well, and so many of the albums that we've listened to, or at the very least a fair amount of them, have sort of been like that. I know Jaren's favorite album we've listened to is Dream Theater's Metropolis Part 2, and that is absolutely an album that if you're listening to it for the first time, you have to listen to it in order, because it's a concept album that tells a very specific story that you're going to completely miss the context of if you don't listen to it in order. And I feel like metal and more, maybe not just metal, definitely not just metal, but underground genres of any type are such they're kind of the only place that sort of thing can really happen. You get people like, say, like Kendrick Lamar, who is a fantastic storyteller and an amazing lyricist, but he still only has a couple of singles on each album that really make it big, and then the rest of the stuff that most people who are not big Kendrick Lamar fans, most people don't listen to that. They listen to the couple of singles and they like them, but they don't dig further. But that's where the story is. That's where the good stuff is. And that's kind of sad.
Yeah, it's the pop music like phenomenon. You just gotta have that one big song that will get you on the radio and it will get you like all over YouTube and get you all the views. And then once you have like the hook in, you can put the rest of your stuff out there.
Yeah, you get the hook in, and the people. I always feel like the people who can appreciate what you have, the people who will appreciate your artistry, are the ones who will stick around to actually experience that artistry. And I think that's part of why metal is such an abrasive genre, as it's an extra filter of saying, if you can't handle this, then maybe you're not the type of person that we want to experience our art. And that might be kind of gatekeeping, as people call it, but I think it's sort of an effective way to filter out the posers, man.
I think it's a fair warning though, like, you gotta like go in there and be like, hey, like this isn't something, that you could just like, I think to get the best experience out of it, you need to kind of sit down. You need to listen to it from start to finish, type of deal. Yeah. You can't just like. I mean, there's some tracks I think that like stand out by themselves. That like I don't think would lose too much if you listen to them out of order. On this album, like I think Speak definitely works by itself. I think First works by itself, and a couple other ones. And I think Your works by itself too, but Yours totally different, and it would not give you a good indication of
what you're
in for. Exactly. But I like I can't like stress it enough that the importance you said come someone that doesn't listen to like a ton of metal, you know, like if you would have just been like, hey, like listen to these like 3 songs and then come do this podcast, you know, I'd been like, all right, like I got like I have notes on these 3 songs, but I feel like I kind of missed the story type of deal. But like
Yeah.
you like sent me the album and I was like, all right, let's do this. You know, I sat down and got my smartphone out and had the lyrics pulled up and I was like, all right, here we go and
Let's do this shit.
let's do it.
All right. Well, I think that's kind of the end of the discussion on that. I do have a couple of things coming up here. Obviously, I talked about the Silent Planet album that's coming out later on this year. I'm really excited for that. They're my second favorite band of all time, and they have a brand new single that is called Guernica. Or no, it's called Northern Fires, and the parentheses is Guernica after the famous Picasso painting and also the Spanish Civil War on which it was based. And that is what the song is about, the Spanish Civil War, more or less. Rivers of Nile, which is a band that we have covered on the podcast.
The podcast. You kids
on the podcast.
You kids in your damn podcast. You podcast.
Rivers of Nile, which has quickly become one of my favorite bands that I've discovered recently. Probably one of my favorite bands ever in the last couple months that I've been listening to them. They are doing a live show on July 13th in Moorhead, Minnesota,
hey,
which
close.
I am really, really hoping to go to if I can take a half day on that Friday to take a drive out to Moorhead and go see them. That would be fantastic. I'm really excited to go see them. And then there is a black gaze, black metal and shoegaze fusion band that we've also covered on the podcast before, Deaf Heaven. They have got a new album coming out, I believe, on July 12th, I want to say. They have a new album coming out called Ordinary Corrupt Human Love, which I think is sort of a loaded title there. So I'm very excited to hear that. Next week, or next time, hopefully, Jaron, not that I haven't enjoyed our time, Matt.
Just laying it on me tonight, man.
Just laying it on you. Hopefully, Jaron will be back next week. Or next time, I would love to discuss the brand new Necrogoblicon album.
There you go.
The brand new Neclo. I can't even say it anymore.
Necrogoblicon.
Necrogoblicon. It's not brand new, but back in April, they have an album that came out called Welcome to Bonkers, which I love to listen or to discuss. I listened to it yesterday, and it's something else. Necrogoblicon is one of those bands that is just hard to describe. They're a goblin-themed melodic death metal band, as you do.
As you do. I mean,
as one does.
I hear they're making a resurgence though. The melodic death metal bands,
goblins,
melodic
death metal bands.
Something about a Necronomicon.
They're on the rise.
Yeah, you know, hey,
they're on the rise. So I would be very thrilled to discuss. It's a new portmanteaus I'm coming up with. That's just been part of my job over the last couple of weeks. Has been me and my coworker just coming up with band names. One of the ones that I came up with is called Stewtopia, which is a band that is entirely based around the character of Stu Pickles. So
I feel like you're doing the world a disservice by that not being an actual band right now. But on that note, be on the lookout for my indie band, Sundials in Seattle, that I've yet to develop. And
yes,
also
Sundials in Seattle.
Also, I'm incredibly tone deaf, so it probably won't be that great. But hey, you know.
I made a post on my personal Instagram the other day of a band that we made up called Bro Country Hit Machine. While we've got a little bit of time here, I might as well read the song list that we came up with, because it's I'm rather proud of a couple of them. Let's see here. Bro Country Hit Machine. Song title number 1. This is also meant to be like a grindcore band, so really just dirty stuff. Song number 1 is Flagurgulin, based on Florida Georgia Line.
I think I pissed there once.
On the Florida Georgia Line?
Yeah, I think so.
You pissed on it?
Once or twice.
Number 2 is Duke Bryan, but Bryan is spelled with an IA instead of RY. Number 3 is Trumpley Dilbert after after Brantley Gilbert. 4 is Krusty Hooer after Justin Moore. Then there is Dick Rustler. That one is a bit more obscure. There's a new artist called Russell Dickerson. So we came up with Dick Rustler. Then there is Brief Turbine after Keith Urban. Shitty Portobello. Do you want to guess who that's based on?
I feel like I won't do the service, man. You got it.
It's Lady Antebellum.
There you go.
Shitty Portobello. And then number 8. This one, I know you love her very much, but number 8 is just Swift.
Oh, dude, you gotta leave my girl out of that, man.
I know.
I like Shitty Portobello though, because it's like it plays on like mushrooms grow under shit, portobello mushrooms. I don't know if that was the original intent, but I'll give that one.
Sure,
I'll give that.
We'll
one,
say it was.
I'll give that one to you for free.
Yeah, we'll say it was. Hopefully, we might actually end up doing something with that. I don't know, because he does. My coworker has played in metal bands in the past, and definitely can play guitar and do vocals and all that.
There you go. You heard it here first. Shitty Portobello coming to
look out. Keep a lookout for Bro Country Hit Machine on the chart,
on the Spotify, the LP dropping at an undisclosed date.
No, we're going on to Bandcamp. We're not going straight to Spotify.
Oh, not with that attitude. You're not.
I suppose not. All right. Well, thank you all very much for coming back to the Bronze Medalist podcast. I know we were gone for a month. Hopefully, we'll have Jaron on in the future. Otherwise, you might see more of Matt or more of other guests as we try and figure out our schedule over the summer. Once again, thank you for listening. My name is Kayle.
I'm Matt.
And this has been the Bronze Medalist podcast, and we have nothing left to say.